What's going on, Broncos country? Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. I want to talk about some of the trade buzz going out there right now and how it involves the Denver Broncos, which could be buyers or sellers when the NFL trade deadline gets here, which is still a ways away. But I came across a Bleacher Report article that listed a handful of trade candidates, and the Broncos were frequently involved with a lot of these players. So let's go one by one, starting with, I would say, the biggest name of all, and that is wide receiver Amari Cooper from the Cleveland Browns, who Bleacher Report listed as a potential trade candidate. The Browns off to a 1-2 start, so a long ways to go before the Browns become sellers because of their slow start, but they've listed the Broncos and the Rams as potential suitors for the former Raider, Cowboy, and now Brown. So, some quick background information on Cooper. He only has a $1.2 million base salary, which is important to note because when you're trading for a player midseason, you are mostly only picking up their base salary. And then you take that base salary, divide it by 17. That's how many game checks they get. So we are 3 weeks into the season. So you're not actually even taking up the entire $1.2 million. You're just taking over the remaining base salary due for the rest of the season. Now, Cooper last week had a dominant performance after a slow start. 7 grabs, 2 touchdowns. He's been one of the most consistent wide receivers over the last near decade at this point. I mean, he was a first-round pick by the Raiders back in 2015. So he's been in the league for a long time, of course, and he's been one of the most consistent go-to guys. I think it's highly unlikely the Browns sell. The NFL trade deadline is November 5th. So what is that, right around kind of week 9, week 10-ish? They'd really have to bottom out in order to accept we're not going anywhere this season, so let's try and get some draft capital for a guy who's going to be a free agent in March and maybe we let walk. I don't think the Browns are that bad of a team, despite their slow start, for them to get to that stage, right? That's a very, very far away ways from right now. And for me, I feel like the Browns, as long as they have at least a sliver of a chance of making the playoffs, they're going to keep everything intact because they've gone all in for this season, all in for Deshaun Watson, and trading Cooper away is the biggest sign of, yep, we are punting on this season, and I don't think they're going to get to that stage by the NFL trade deadline, even if they are below 500. They'd really have to be far below 500. Now, having said all that, if Denver is rolling and they pick up a win on Sunday against the Jets, and they get to 2-2 and they start stacking wins and Bo Nix starts to ball out, I would not put it past the Broncos to at least inquire on maybe a guy like Cooper or another wide receiver if they feel like, you know what, we feel like we are this year's Houston Texans, right? We're the team that no one gave a shot, and we're going to go and make the playoffs, and we want to put together the best possible roster. So Cooper would definitely be an enticing target if he truly were available and the Broncos were good. But to me, I feel like those two things happening in the same universe, it just doesn't seem all that likely. And that's more about the Browns getting to a point where they become massive sellers than the Broncos being good. The Broncos could be good. The Broncos could be buyers at the trade deadline. But if they're buying, they've got to feel like they've got a really good chance of going to the playoffs and actually making a run in the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to get to that stage over the next 5, 6, 7 weeks before the trade deadline. That to me just isn't a big enough window after a 1-2 start. So we'll have to wait and see, of course, but I don't think you should count on Cooper coming over to Denver. But let me know, should the Broncos be sellers or buyers? Let me know with a yes, no, or too early. Give me a buyers or sellers kind of approach as we get into the NFL trade deadline window, which is going to be popping up all over your feed the next couple of weeks. All right, let's move on to our next trade candidate, and that is a sell for the Denver Broncos, okay? This would be quarterback Zach Wilson. So, Wilson, QB3, preseason hero, but obviously as quarterback injuries start piling up, like Tua in Miami, there are going to be discussions about what backups could be available, and you should expect to see Wilson's name pop up. For every single injury that pops up over the next few weeks, Zach Wilson will immediately be matched with that team. For me, when it comes to Wilson, I'm only interested in trading him if you get an offer you cannot refuse. right? I don't think they should just be looking to trade him just for the sake of trading him. I'd rather have Zach Wilson as a QB3 on this team than a 2026 7th-round draft pick. That draft pick's not going to give you anything. Let's just cut the shit here. Yes, he could be Brock Purdy, but very, 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 very small chance of that happening. Meanwhile, while we can't really see Wilson's impact on the field from a stats perspective, I do think he serves a good role of getting Bo Nix, a rookie, ready every single Sunday because he is the most experienced guy in that locker room, right? At the quarterback position. No one's played more games than Zach Wilson at quarterback on this team. So I'm a believer of Sean Payton traded for Zach Wilson. I think he sees something in him. I don't think he's just going to try and flip him a few months later and maybe move up like 30 spots in the draft. That was the end game for Zach Wilson. Let's get him. We're going to give up a 7th and we're going to get a 6th back. That doesn't really seem like you're gaining a whole lot in my opinion. So if a team makes you an offer you can't refuse, okay, let's do what's best for business. But if we're just trading him because a team needs a quarterback and they gave us a deep future 7th-round draft pick, I'll pass on that. Next candidate, wide receiver Treylon Burks. So Bleacher Report also listing the Broncos as suitors for Burks, the former 1st-round draft pick out of Arkansas, who has been a massive disappointment. There's no other way to put it. I mean, this is one of the worst deals in NFL history. Maybe not the worst, but one of the towards the top. I mean, if you don't remember, the Titans dealt A.J. Brown to the Eagles, got the Eagles draft pick, used it on Burks, and felt like, hey, we're the smartest one in the room. We don't have to pay A.J. Brown, and now we just got another great young wide receiver who can be cheap for us for the next 4 to 5 seasons. Here's the issue with that plan. Treylon Burks has been bad. A.J. Brown's been very, very good. In fact, if it's not for a couple of injuries, I don't think Burks is going to get nearly as much runway as he does right now. He's playing over half of the snaps, which doesn't sound so bad, but when you're the 1st-round pick and you get on the field 1 out of every 2 plays, that doesn't really speak volume about your contribution to the offense. I would give up nothing more than a 6th-round draft pick for Treylon Burks. I understand he's got that 1st-round name notoriety, right? Oh, I remember his highlights from Arkansas. Like, he was a yak monster. People kind of compared him to Deebo Samuel. Sure, Sean Payton might see a lot of talent in him and decide, hey, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but I ain't doing it for a 4th or a 5th. I just feel like you can probably get a better player in those rounds in this upcoming draft, and at least one that's going to be on a rookie deal for longer than Burks is right now. So if the Titans are willing to give him up for a 6th-round draft pick, sure. Let's throw a 6th-round flyer at him, see if this coaching staff can press the right buttons, and they can get him at least to a playable standard where he's not just sitting on the bench half of the time. Other than that, pass. Now, before we look at the final trade candidate, I do want to tell you guys about an awesome deal going on with our friends over at Fanatics. This Broncos hoodie is 25% off when you go to chatsports.com/DEN hoodie. So as the fall and winter months get here, if you want to stay warm without breaking the bank, get it today because in a few weeks, these warm weather deals are going to go out the window and you're going to be paying a lot more for this hoodie. So go right now, chatsports.com/DEN hoodie. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. 4th and final player on the trading block, defensive tackle DJ Jones. Fortunately, the former 49er has not really lived up to expectations when he signed that 3-year, $30 million contract. This is the 3rd and final year of that deal, and his snap percentage has gone down in the final year. Playing a little under half of the snaps, which is the lowest of his time with the Broncos. Pro Football Focus ranks him not even quite as a top half interior defensive lineman. It's only been 3 games, so nothing to freak out too much over here. But the coaching staff is not putting him on the field, so that kind of tells you a lot about what they think of him. And then the numbers, they don't really help out either. Now, I never think you should completely evaluate an interior defensive lineman based on box scores because that's not really what their purpose is. Like, you don't pay these guys to get a bunch of sacks. You pay them to help other players get a bunch of sacks because they eat up a bunch of offensive linemen. They completely stuff the run game for the opposition. but that's just not really happening right now for Jones. I only see this trade going down if Denver hits a complete fire sale mode, right? If the Broncos unfortunately start to like bottom out or something, and then they start stacking losses on one top of another. Last year, they did not trade. They held on to all their pieces, which, I mean, I kind of want to say it didn't really work out because they went on that great 5-game winning streak, but they ultimately missed the playoffs. They get a 5th and a 6th round draft pick for Jerry Jeudy. They would have gotten a lot more for Jeudy if they traded him in October of last year. They get nothing for Justin Simmons. So there were a couple of pieces they held on to that they could have gotten either something or more if they dealt him or dealt them during the trade deadline. I only want to see DJ Jones get dealt if this is a fire sale mode like last year, because ultimately the defensive line, it may not look like a really sexy position group of like, hey, those are a bunch of really big impact players, but you can't really quantify their role for a team when they make a great tackle on 3rd and 2 to get the ball back to their offense, and the offense marches down the field and kicks a game-winning field goal. All the attention goes to Bo Nix and the offense and Will Lutz for making that happen. But none of that would have happened if DJ Jones or another defensive lineman didn't make that nice tackle on 3rd and 2 to bring it 3rd and 1, and all they get is one measly little 1 TKL in the box score. But that game-winning drive is not possible if you don't get that stop. So while you may not feel like interior defensive linemen are super valuable, these games are won and lost in the trenches, right? You want to give your offense a shot. If you want that to happen, you got to get the ball back to them. And most of the time, that means stopping the run in the 4th quarter. So DJ Jones may not jump out to you as an extremely valuable asset, but even if he is just playing 47% of the snaps, I like to see some strength in that defensive line. And you're not going to get a great return for him. I mean, let's be honest. No one's going to give up a valuable pick for a guy that even Denver doesn't put a lot of value in because they're putting on the bench more than on the field. So if you're just going to get bottom of the barrel chump change for him, and that could be generous, just hold on to him at that point. So of the 4 players we talked about on today's episode, which trade would you like to pursue? Acquiring Amari Cooper, definitely the most expensive. Treylon Burks, trying to salvage his career. Getting something for Zach Wilson or DJ Jones? Let me know in the comment section below. For me, I'll be honest, I'm not really barking up any of these trees. I don't think the Amari Cooper one is very realistic. I'm not very interested in Treylon Burks because I don't think he's good. I'm not interested in trading away Zach Wilson unless you get a great offer, which maybe you will if some big injury were to pop up over the next few weeks. And then DJ Jones, I won't, be a broken record, but I do think he has some value on this defensive line, and I don't think that's a position group you want to be moving away from in the middle of the season as the season goes on and injuries start stacking up, and those big 300-pound-plus dudes, they get tired as the year goes along. It's tough to keep that motor going from September to January, so taking away a rotational piece of that is not going to make it any easier for anyone else on that defensive line. So that's my 2 cents right there. I would probably say no to all those trades as things currently stand. All right, that will do it for us on today's episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, make sure to do so down below, and I'll see you all later.